Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that I think is relevant to pretty much everyone. Effective time management strategies. So this guide we found is how to manage time effectively. One of the first things that jumped out at me was this idea that we're losing like 6 hours a week on average just to disorganization. 6 hours.
It's a staggering statistic, isn't it?
It is. And then it talks about this whole concept of like the 3 faces of time, which we'll dive into. And then there's a whole section on like time stealers, the things that are just robbing us of these precious hours without us even realizing it.
Yeah, you're going to leave this deep dive with, I think, so many actionable strategies, things you can apply like immediately to just reclaim some of that time and boost your productivity.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump in. I think one of the most common things we all say is, I just don't have enough time. But this guide kind of reframes that in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and it starts with the good news. We all actually have the same 24 hours, so it's not about getting more time. It's about maximizing the time that we have.
Right, and that's where that statistic about losing 6 hours a week to disorganization comes in.
Exactly. It highlights that this lost time is actually a choice. We choose to be disorganized, and we can choose to reclaim that time through better planning and organization.
So it's not like a personality flaw, like, oh, I'm just a disorganized person.
Yeah.
It's a choice we're making.
Exactly. We can choose to be more organized, to implement systems, and to be more mindful of how we're spending those precious hours.
I love that shift in perspective. Now let's talk about this 3 faces of time concept. The guide breaks time down into prime time, secondary time, and tertiary time.
Right, so prime time is your golden hour, when you are at your peak performance, laser-focused, ready to tackle those big, important tasks.
So for some people, that's first thing in the morning. Other people, it might be late at night. It really depends on you and your own energy rhythms. But the key question is, are you actually using your prime time for those high-impact activities?
Exactly. That's where you want to be focusing your energy on the things that are going to move the needle forward.
I know I'm sometimes guilty of wasting my prime time on just, like, busy work.
Mm-hmm.
Or even, just scroll through social media.
We've all been there. But the guide really encourages us to take an honest look at how we're spending our time and to make sure we're aligning our most important tasks with our most productive hours.
Okay, so then there's secondary time. What exactly falls into that category?
So secondary time is all about those less demanding tasks. Maybe things you can do on autopilot or that require less focus.
So like what? Give me some examples.
Sure, it could be things like answering emails, returning phone calls, or doing some light reading.
Got it. So things that are important but don't necessarily require your full brain power.
Exactly.
Okay, and then we have tertiary time.
Ah, yes, tertiary time. This is all about rest and rejuvenation.
That sounds important.
It is crucial. It's essential to have this downtime to recharge our batteries and prevent burnout.
So what kinds of things would you put in tertiary time?
This is where you schedule in those activities that help you de-stress and refuel. Things like spending time with loved ones, engaging in hobbies, or simply getting a good night's sleep.
So I guess the big takeaway here is to be really intentional about how we're spending our time and to make sure that we're giving enough attention to all 3 of these categories.
Absolutely. It's about creating a balanced approach to time management that supports both our productivity and our well-being.
So for our listeners out there, think about your 3 faces of time. When do you feel most energized and focused? What deserves to be scheduled during your prime time? And how much of your day is actually dedicated to each of these categories?
It's amazing how much time we can reclaim simply by being more intentional about how we structure our day.
And that leads us to another really important concept in the guide, optimal use of time, or OUT. And it's all about figuring out which activities have the greatest impact on your goals.
Yes. This is where we start to personalize time management. What might be a high-value activity for one person could be a complete time waster for someone else.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Not at all. The guide uses this great example of an outside salesperson. Their OUT is likely the time spent face-to-face with potential clients, building relationships, and closing deals.
Right, because that's where the magic happens. Those personal connections are essential for driving sales.
Exactly. So to maximize their OUT, they might schedule all their client meetings back-to-back in a geographically efficient route, Or maybe they handle administrative tasks and travel during their secondary time so they can dedicate their prime time to those high-impact client interactions.
So it's all about being strategic and really maximizing those activities that contribute most directly to your goals. And the guide even suggests tracking your time, just like you would track your finances, to see where those hours are actually going.
Exactly. They call it creating a time profit or loss statement. It means keeping a detailed record of how you spend your time and comparing it to your planned schedule.
So you can see where you might be leaking time or where you could be more efficient.
Exactly. Once you have that awareness, you can start making adjustments,
Hmm.
optimizing your schedule, and reclaiming those lost hours.
I love that. It's like taking control of our time, just like we try to take control of our money,
Absolutely. It's all about being more intentional with our most valuable resource.
which is time.
Exactly.
So we've talked about the importance of maximizing prime time, minimizing those less important tasks, and making sure we're taking time to recharge. But even with the best intentions, there are these sneaky little things, these time stealers that the guide talks about, that can really derail our efforts.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those sneaky culprits can really sabotage our productivity without us even realizing it.
So let's talk about some of the biggest time stealers and what we can do to, like, arrest them.
All right, let's put those time bandits behind bars.
Perfect. So the first one, and I think this is something we all struggle with, is procrastination.
Ugh, procrastination, the ultimate thief of time.
Right. And the guide has some really interesting suggestions for how to overcome it. Like, have you ever heard of using visualization to combat procrastination? So instead of focusing on, like, the dread of the task,
Yeah.
you visualize yourself completing it. You imagine that feeling of accomplishment, that relief. And sometimes just shifting our perspective like that can be enough to overcome that initial resistance.
I can see how that would be helpful. It's like tricking your brain into focusing on the positive outcome rather than the negative feelings associated with the task itself.
Exactly. The guide also talks about involving others as a way to combat procrastination. Like, if your procrastination is impacting other people, sometimes just talking to them about it
Mm-hmm.
can provide that extra motivation to get moving.
So it's about accountability. When we realize that our procrastination is affecting others, it can give us that push to take action.
Exactly. And if the task just feels overwhelming, the guide suggests breaking it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
That's a classic productivity tip. It's
Yeah.
so much easier to get started when you're not facing a giant, daunting task.
Right. It's about creating momentum. And then once you have those smaller steps, the guide says to actually schedule them in your calendar.
Hmm.
Treat them like any other important appointment.
I love that. It's about making that commitment to yourself and honoring it.
And then finally, and this one made me laugh, the guide says to avoid other procrastinators.
Huh. That's so true. Procrastination can be contagious.
You really can. So surround yourself with people who inspire you to take action and get things done.
Yeah, find those people who have that get it done energy.
All right, so moving on to another notorious time stealer, disorganization.
Ah, yes. Disorganization, the clutter monster that can really suck the time out of our day.
So any tips for how to slay that monster?
Well, the guide stresses the importance of systems for everything, whether it's filing, emails, your workspace. Having clear processes in place can save so much time and energy in the long run.
Systems. I love systems. When everything has a designated place, it's so much easier to stay organized and find what you need when you need it.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to purge. The guide suggests setting discard dates for paper and digital files.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'm definitely guilty of holding on to things way longer than I should.
We all do it. But it's so liberating to let go of that clutter and create more space for what truly matters.
Okay, so systems, purging. What about our physical workspace? Any tips there?
The guide recommends keeping only essential items on your desk and storing everything else out of sight.
It's all about minimizing distractions, right?
Exactly. A clutter-free workspace can do wonders for focus and productivity.
Okay, so essential items only on the desk. What else?
And have a designated spot for incoming items, like a physical inbox or a specific folder on your computer.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about minimizing those context switches that can really drain our mental energy.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered procrastination and disorganization. What about those dreaded time suckers? Meetings.
Oh, meetings. They can be such productivity black holes if they're not managed effectively.
So how do we run more effective meetings and avoid them turning into these, like, never-ending time wasters?
Well, the guide has a whole section on this, and it all starts with having a clear agenda and a time limit.
So we know exactly what we're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
And we have a defined endpoint.
Exactly. It helps keep everyone focused and on track.
And the guide even suggests setting a lockout time for meetings. Like if people are late, they miss the meeting.
Wow, that's a bold move. But I can see how it would encourage punctuality and accountability.
Yeah, it sends a clear message that everyone's time is valuable. The
Exactly.
guide also stresses the importance of only inviting essential attendees.
Right. The more people involved, the more potential for distractions and side conversations.
And then whenever possible, consider alternatives to in-person meetings, like conference calls or online collaboration tools.
Yeah, technology can be a real game changer when it comes to streamlining communication and collaboration.
Okay, so let's talk about multitasking. I used to think I was a master multitasker, but this guide actually makes a pretty compelling argument against it.
Really? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so it points out that multitasking often leads to decreased focus and attention to detail.
That makes sense.
Right. And when we're not focused, we make mistakes. We end up having to redo things, which ultimately wastes more time in the long run.
So it's a false sense of productivity.
Exactly. The guide suggests being more mindful of our multitasking habits and asking ourselves, am I truly being effective here, or would I be better off focusing on one task at a time?
It's about being honest with ourselves and recognizing when multitasking is actually hindering our productivity rather than enhancing it.
And to help create that more focused work time, the guide recommends limiting those incoming attacks.
Incoming.
You know, those constant bombardments of emails, phone calls, and notifications.
Ah, yes, those can be relentless.
Right. It's like we're under constant siege.
Exactly.
So the guide suggests taking control by turning off notifications, letting calls go to voicemail, and scheduling specific times to check email and social media.
It's about setting boundaries and protecting our time and attention from those constant distractions.
And speaking of boundaries, don't forget the power of breaks.
Breaks. You mean like actually stepping away from work?
Yes. The guide recommends taking short breaks throughout the day to disconnect from technology and recharge.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but those mini breaks can actually boost productivity.
They can. A quick walk outside, a few minutes of meditation, anything that helps you clear your head and come back refreshed.
I like it. It's about giving our brains a chance to rest and reset.
Exactly. And to further solidify those boundaries, the guide talks about establishing clear rules for your time.
Rules? Like what kind of rules?
It could be something as simple as turning off your phone during dinner, or designating certain times as no work zones.
Ah, so it's about creating healthy habits and setting expectations for ourselves and others.
Exactly. And the guide emphasizes the importance of communicating those boundaries to your colleagues, clients, and even your family.
Right. It's about respecting our own time and helping others respect it as well.
Now, let's get into some practical tools and techniques for implementing all of these strategies. The guide has this really helpful tool called the Delegated Tasks Checklist. It's basically a step-by-step guide for effectively delegating tasks to others. It covers everything from clearly defining the goal to establishing milestones and monitoring progress.
Delegation can be such a game changer, but it only works if we do it right.
Exactly. And this checklist provides a clear framework for ensuring that those delegated tasks are completed effectively and efficiently.
I like it.
And for those tasks that can't be delegated, the guide offers some helpful tips for outsourcing.
Full risk.
Right. And remember, effective time management is an ongoing process. The guide encourages us to regularly evaluate our habits, tools, and systems and make adjustments as needed.
It's about finding what works best for you and constantly striving to improve.
Exactly. Because the goal isn't to achieve some mythical state of perfect time management, but to be more intentional and effective with our time so we can achieve our goals and live more fulfilling lives.
Well said.
And remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Start with one small change today and build from there.
Small steps, consistency, and a focus on progress are key. Beyond the tools and techniques, there's a deeper level. The mindset behind effective time management. It's not just about doing things differently, it's about thinking differently about time itself.
So it's not just about the hacks and the tricks, it's about like a fundamental shift in how we approach time.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a mindset of awareness, intentionality, and discipline. And that shift starts with how we begin each day.
Okay, so how we start our day sets the tone for everything that follows.
Precisely. The guide suggests starting each day with a sense of accomplishment. Even a small win first thing in the morning can set a positive tone for the entire day. It doesn't have to be a major task. It could be something as simple as making your bed or doing a quick workout.
I like that. It's about building momentum, right? Starting the day on a positive note.
Exactly. And then throughout the day, The key is to stay focused on our goals and be ruthless with our time.
Ruthless. I like the sound of that. What does that look like in practice?
It means saying no to distractions, prioritizing those high-impact tasks, and protecting your prime time.
And remembering that we're not machines. We need to take breaks, recharge, and refuel to maintain our productivity.
Exactly. The guide reminds us not to overschedule ourselves. It's better to have a few well-planned, focused hours than to try to cram too much into a single day.
That's so true. When we overcommit, we set ourselves up for stress and overwhelm.
And that's the opposite of effective time management. It's about finding that balance between productivity and well-being.
And celebrating those wins along the way, right?
Absolutely. No matter how small, those successes deserve to be acknowledged. It helps us stay motivated and reinforces those positive habits.
Because effective time management is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. It's a process of continuous improvement. The guide encourages us to embrace the journey and be patient with ourselves, focus on progress, not perfection.
So it's not about beating ourselves up when we inevitably slip up. It's about getting back on track and learning from those experiences.
Exactly. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. It's up to us to decide how we use them.
And with the right mindset and the strategies we've explored in this deep dive, I think we can all become a lot more intentional and effective with our time.
Absolutely. Taking control of our time is the key to unlocking our potential and creating a life that we truly love.
Well said. To our listeners out there, remember, time is your most valuable resource. Use it wisely, invest it in the things that matter most, and create a life that brings you joy and fulfillment. And you don't have to do it all at once. Start with one small change today and build on your successes. Small steps, consistency, and a focus on progress are key. Before we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question from the guide. What's one thing you can do differently today to reclaim an hour of your time? We encourage you to explore the guide further and discover even more valuable strategies and insights. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, be well, make the most of every minute, and keep diving deep.